Hello, everyone. Welcome back to my running podcast. I'm very excited about today's topic because I believe that as runners, we're always looking for ways to improve. We're getting the best running gear, the best running shoes, the fastest one that get us out there. We're looking for like these expensive gels and electrolytes and all of this running paraphernalia. But I think there's one important element that we tend to overlook, but it's actually very important for our performance and of course feeling good and with energy every day. And for that, what we actually want to pay attention to what we eat. That will be our nutrition. I'm gonna be honest to you, I think that is the hardest part of the training, like getting the right fuel and the right all of these macros and micronutrients that our body needs to actually feel good every day, not feel tired, and actually perform very well on race days. So for that, I'm very happy to have Dr. Sarah Ruiz with us today to talk about this topic. So let me share a little bit with you about who Sarah is. So Dr. Sarah has been practicing as a registered dietitian and certified diabetes care and education specialist for over 10 years in El Paso, Texas. Prior to becoming a dietitian, she completed a culinary degree at Le Cordon Bleu in Austin, Texas. She holds also a PhD in interdisciplinary health sciences from the University of Texas at El Paso. She also currently holds a position as an assistant professor in the Human Nutrition and Diabetes program at New Mexico State University, NMSU, our neighbors. She's also the owner of Sun City Dietitian, a very successful private practice founded in 2019, which provides medical nutrition therapy and diabetes education, the latter holding an American Diabetes Association accreditation. And to be honest with you, I think this is very short for the whole, like this vast experience that Sarah has. I know I've had her in some of my classes at UTEP. Students love her. She's great teaching, providing information. I know she also gives like classes about meal prep, so the students in public health can actually go and teach people in the community how to do proper and healthy meal preparation as part of their daily lives. I know she has more, but she continues to be like very successful. I'm very proud to see her grow. So thank you, Sarah, for coming to the show today with us. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you. I'm doing well. That was a really nice welcome. So I appreciate it. Thanks for
No,
having me on.
I'm so happy to see you grow. You know, you've been like so successful in academia, private practice, and that's pretty cool. And most, above all, you're from El Paso. So, hey, I'm proud of that. All right, Sarah. So, just to get into that and to get, I guess, to know you a little bit better here for all those listeners of the podcast, can you share with us a little bit how you got interested, I guess, in nutrition and share a little bit of that experience with us?
Sure. So I really thought I wanted to work in chronic disease management. It was something that I saw like family wise dealing with different issues, diabetes, kidney disease. And as I started studying as a student and really going out into the community, I fell in love with prevention. So, not getting disease, but trying to see are there strategies to help us not get there. And that was something that I really knew I wanted to work with were populations who were at risk, which tends to be our El Paso community, and help us just learn how can we mitigate those risk factors? What can we do lifestyle wise to help keep us healthy?
Awesome. And that sounds like very public health, that primary intervention. Do you have any background in public health or
I
you
do.
do? Okay.
I do. I knew I wanted to get my master's in public health, so I have an MPH because I really wanted to do more of that type of work than what I originally thought I was going to do. So it was a really interesting journey for me, kind of transition from I'm going to manage disease to more so let's work on this side of things. So yeah.
Yeah, I would like that sounds like a public health
hmm
practitioner. So, and I feel like in public health prevention, and I'm like going to another place, but I guess public health like sounds like more uh, challenging because I think we tend to focus on populations rather than in the clinic, busy patients one at a time, and I guess treating. And in public health, we have like that, I think, more ambitious goal of targeting a whole population,
Mhm.
and taking that step ahead.
Yeah, absolutely. But I have to say, when individuals do come and see us for prevention services, they are great. They're wonderful because the buy-in's there. They know that they have a risk factor. They want to make changes. And so I enjoy doing that, on the one-on-one. The unfortunate part sometimes comes with things like insurance coverage, right? Making sure that people see prevention as a needed service. Sometimes, unfortunately, we wait until people have the condition and then now it becomes a medical necessity. And that's just really an unfortunate part of healthcare.
Yeah, definitely. So for your private practice, do you mostly manage people with chronic diseases, or do you also take like runners, for example, to guide them with their nutrition goals?
That's a great question. So we actually see all sorts of nutrition related issues. So it's not just for chronic disease. We also do see athletes in our practice. We see prevention services. We work with adolescents who are trying to eat healthy. They might be athletes themselves. So it really does vary. So we have different dietitians that focus on different things, but we see from anywhere from babies to preconception nutrition all the way to older adults, and they don't always come in with a condition. Sometimes it's just for general healthy eating, making sure we're doing the right things.
Okay, perfect. And I know, and I don't know if you've said this before or I got it wrong. You were working previously, right? With like as a guidance for athletes in UTEP.
Mhm.
Was that right? Can you
Yeah,
share that
so that
experience with us?
that's a great question. So when I was going to school, a lot of people were really interested in sports nutrition because that's a hot topic in nutrition. And again, I didn't think that that was going to be my pathway. But one of my first jobs was working with the military, and that's how I got into sports nutrition because I was working specifically with soldiers about to deploy for different special units, and they were athletes. So we needed to make sure that their body composition was well, that they were hydrating the way that they were supposed to, so that when they were being sent on these missions, we could help them by making sure that they were being healthy. So stacking, timing, all of those things. And that's how I met Dr. Duarte at
Okay.
UTEP at that time. And there was a course that needed to be taught, which was sports nutrition. And since I was working in that area, I took on that course and I've continued to teach that course since 2016. And what really became a part of the course was student athletes had this need for nutrition guidance. And I became that person because they're in my class. And it was a really good time to focus on their different needs based on the different sports that they play.
Awesome. Okay. And what did you get to see with this that I guess needs of proper dieting? I feel like yeah, we know about food and we need to eat healthy and we need to maybe like do proper carbs and hydration, but I find it like to be honestly like very challenging to
Mhm.
get like the proper nutrition that I need during like training. Uh, did you see that challenge with the athletes? Do they struggle as well, or is it easy for athletes just to get their daily needs?
Great question. I find it more challenging. I think it's harder for athletes because you have greater needs. And so that means more of the key nutrients, not less of them. But you tend to have less time because of all of the things that you describe from training to planning. Most of the time, student athletes are going to have school competing with the schedule. But if we think of adults, so runners like yourself, you have other challenges such as family, work. So time becomes a big thing, and eating nutritious can take a lot of time. We have to think ahead, plan, and it can get complicated with all of the misinformation out there as well.
Exactly. And we tend to rely on these energy drinks and a lot of things that we see out there, like on social media, right? Like an easy, I guess, way to help us with that demand of energy. All right, Sarah. So getting, I guess, into the topic, I have a couple of questions for you. If you can help us. This podcast is mostly directed for those, I guess, beginners who are barely getting into the marathon, and maybe they're running their first marathon, or they want to run their first marathon, so they want to get into this endurance sports. So can you explain to the listeners what is like really, what are the different types of fuel that our body needs, I guess, in general?
That's a great question. And I think this is a great topic. So, similar to sports, I actually train or teach nutrition in the sense of it's a marathon, right? So, as we're discussing this topic with the different nutrients, keep in mind that it takes time. So, as we start to kind of build upon the diet, it's not an overnight, we're suddenly going to start eating this way. We have to teach our body that these foods are going to be the new foods we're going to be eating and in these quantities. The main macronutrients that we should be really thinking about are carbohydrates primarily, especially complex carbohydrates that come from things like fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes. And then we also want to focus next is going to be our proteins, making sure that maybe timing as we're starting to really consider this training process with lean protein. Kind of my rule of thumb, which is a super silly rule of thumb, but we can remember this. If an animal has more legs on it, it tends to have more cholesterol, less of the good fats that we're looking for. So think about pork and beef. They have four legs, more cholesterol. Chicken, turkey, two, so they're going to have less. And then fish, let's hope those guys don't have legs. They're going to have practically no cholesterol, but they're going to give us that key nutrient to help us rebuild our muscles, our tissues, recover better, prevent injury. And then we also have our fat. We do need that fat. Fat sometimes can become a fuel source itself, depending on the event that we're training for. And we want to try to get those omega-3 types of fats. So things such as cooking with olive oil, or maybe incorporating nuts like walnuts, almonds, and then trying to just balance things out. The more color, we're generally going to be doing a decent job of getting all of our essential, also micronutrients. And if things look a little bit more on the brown side, so if we're starting to look at just potatoes, just chicken, just grains, we might be missing some of the other things that can help us keep our immune system up. Something to really consider as athletes is your immune system can become more compromised than the general person. So you need those extra vitamins and minerals. And unfortunately, supplements sometimes aren't regulated, so we don't really know how much you're absorbing compared to the food that we're eating.
Is it recommended to go get like a medical checkup to check like some of these levels of micronutrients? I guess your iron or any other micronutrients that you recommend?
Absolutely. So I highly recommend if you can get a panel and request to your physician which values you would like to look at. That could be really helpful because often we feel fatigue or we feel certain symptoms. We're not recovering as fast as we would like, and it could be a deficiency. Or even as we're starting this process, we might be experiencing cravings. So you might find yourself wanting sweets or something really salty, but it could just be a deficiency that's presenting itself in a different way. But a lab would verify that. You'd be able to see, okay, this is what I need to do, especially if you're a female athlete. Our menstrual cycle can play a role. We might have other deficiencies. So iron, maybe looking at vitamin D for things like fatigue, also possibly B12, depending on what we are feeling. Those can all be great things to add to a panel.
And I think that's very interesting because, like you're saying, I think our body is very smart to give us these very specific, I guess, cravings. Like because you certainly feel like this. It happens to me. This a massive amount of craving for salt, like at night. I guess because of that profuse sweating that we're having, and maybe we're not meeting those.
Mhm.
I guess that's that amount of sodium in electrolytes or maybe many other drinks. Are those tablet salts recommended as part of training?
That's a great question. My answer is going to be a yes and no. It's going to
Okay.
depend based on how your needs are, based on what your numbers actually are, and based on your hydration schedule. So if you're finding that at the end of every event or practice session or whatever you're training for, you're starting to feel these symptoms, it might not just be a sodium deficiency. It could also be an electrolyte deficiency, but we won't know that unless we were to be looking at our panel a little more regularly. And also just looking at our urine output. That can be a really good indicator color-wise. Of course, there's foods that can change the color of our urine, but are we getting enough of the things that we should be? The reason I recommend proceeding with caution is depending on where you are in your training regimen, if we're not really exercising certain amounts of time or sweating certain quantities, we might actually be affecting other things such as our blood pressure, especially with brands like Liquid IV being out there. They have a good amount of sodium, but if you don't need it, it can be something that can be detrimental to our health. If it's something that, let's say we have risk for high blood pressure and we're taking, we might not need that sodium. So it's almost dependent on you as an individual. So proceed with caution. There's nothing wrong with taking something if it's needed. But if what you're missing is something else and you're kind of replenishing with that, you might find that you don't feel better because it wasn't what your body really needed.
Okay. And I think that's another one, I guess we're relying a little bit more like on micronutrients here, but iron, right? Iron is one of those, I guess, elements that you gotta be careful to not like overtake. I think it's one of those, I guess, deficiency. It's better to have like a deficiency that actually, I think, like an overload of iron, right? So it's better to make sure to get like a medical, like a lab workup of iron, or to get that panel for iron levels, right?
Absolutely. So one way that I work in particular with female athletes, but sometimes with male athletes as well, is to recommend food sources. So think of green leafy vegetables and then combining or complementing it with vitamin C containing foods. So spinach with a little bit of lemon juice. And you're going to absorb that iron, but we're not necessarily going to consume enough that now it's causing some type of toxic effect. It's just enough that it's keeping us healthy, but we're getting it from natural food sources.
True. And I know that iron deficiency anemia is kind of like a common deficiency, especially like on runners, right? Because of the constant food strike with, I guess, in long distance running. Is that something common that you encounter?
I I think across the board. So not
Yeah.
just in runners, I find that with many athletes, iron deficiency anemia can become a thing. It can be very present, and they might not even realize that they're going through it until they get a panel and suddenly the symptoms that they've been feeling that they thought were from overtraining or maybe their body not recovering are actually from this deficiency. So that's what's really interesting. I think across the board, you'll see this very common in
Yeah.
athletes, even pediatric athletes. You'll see that this becomes a thing.
Like a common, especially like females, right? Because of that,
Yes.
like the cycles. And for example, when you're requesting that panel, I know that like the iron, and also you have to check for the ferritin
Mhm.
levels. Which one is more reliable to check like for a deficiency?
I normally recommend both because at
Okay.
times, one, for example, if you order iron, it might not fully show us the big picture of what's going on versus the ferritin is going to give us a more in that time point. One thing to keep in mind that can be difficult with either of these tests is that it's very variable. So, one of the problems can become, depending on the time of the month that you might take that test or even the day, the diet variation that can happen in a week can change that value. So I wouldn't just rely on the value alone. I would
Mhm.
also say, look at your symptoms. Are we feeling chronic fatigue? Are we noticing that we have some injuries that really aren't recovering quick enough? Some other symptoms as well. So even if it were to come back normal, I think it doesn't hurt for athletes to just focus on iron containing foods because there's no harm in optimizing that. Even if this does come back completely normal, you might actually see the benefits from just consuming those anyway.
Yeah, that's true. Like definitely. All right, Sarah. I guess moving on for talking about this caloric intake. I feel that there's like a lot of people who start running to lose weight, but like when some people they say I'm gonna sign up for a marathon to lose weight, I do not recommend it because I feel that when you see the amount of calories that your body actually needs, and I think it's very common that you actually gain a little weight during the marathon training process, right? Because your body understanding needs to hold on to some nutrients and some food and that storage to help you out. Um, but in that case, I know a lot of these new runners are like super afraid of carbs. Can you like tell us or talk to us a little bit about the needs for, I guess, higher carbs, like to meet the demands that our muscles require to perform well?
You're bringing up an excellent point that I think is so critical for athletes to understand, and that's there's a big difference between weight gain and muscle gain and body composition, and really understanding in particular, I commend you all for training for a marathon. That takes strength. And with strength comes increased muscle. And with that, there can be an increase in weight. But that's not a bad thing. We might even see that we increase our body fat percentage a bit. And that might not be something that we're necessarily comfortable with, but it's something that comes with increasing your strength. So think about when you're training, you're not just doing long distance running, you might be doing interval training, sprint training to be able to strengthen your capacity to do that type of exercise, and you need that muscle. So in order to do that, I would agree, it's probably not the best time to try to lose weight if we're trying to do this for the purpose of a marathon or a half marathon. So we want to focus on getting stronger. And that's where eating more is going to come with it. If we don't, we become high risk for things such as injury. And injury can be a big setback because we're making tons of progress and suddenly we have this injury. We can no longer do our physical activity. We start to feel even some symptoms of depression. So making sure we're getting enough carbohydrates, enough calories is key. And carbohydrates are the most important of the macronutrients when it comes to this specific sport. We want to make sure we get them. Arguably, every sport, I think carbs are the most important. And so we want to focus on the complex carbs, things that aren't going to affect our triglycerides or aren't going to affect our blood sugars negatively, but they're going to help us to store our glycogen so that on race day, our backup store, glycogen being that backup reservoir of gas, can be released when we need it and help us finish that race. If you don't rely on these carbs and we don't get enough and we just focus on other macros, we can't build that muscle that we need. And again, it just goes back to how can we repair? How can we recover? How can we continue to do the things we want to do physically?
And I think you brought out two important. I have so many points that I want to bring from here, but number one, injuries. Injuries it's like our common that's our enemy, right? When it comes like to training, but maybe there comes a point where we all develop an injury. Sometimes we don't understand why we might be trying to do everything by the book, doing easy runs, recovery runs, try to do everything so carefully, doing strength training, and boom, suddenly we have I see people developing injuries. Is the muscle more prone to injury or takes a longer time to recover an injury if we're not consuming the proper carb intake? Is there a relationship between those factors?
There actually is, and this is research based. You can see in cases where we're looking at athletes who might even be dealing with some disordered eating to some capacity where we know for sure they're not getting enough in terms of energy. They get an injury. And now, even if they're eating protein, but they're avoiding certain macros such as carbs, the body will not use protein to help with the recovery and the repair of the tissue. It's going to start to use protein as energy, which that's not what we want. So in order to avoid that or prevent that, that's where the carbs can be really beneficial to help give us the energy even during injury. That way the protein now can do its job. So it absolutely is correlated. We want to make sure that we are eating to kind of fuel our body and to allow us to recover, recharge, repair. It's our gas. Think of it similar to a car, and you athletes are sports cars. So you need to think of optimal fuel, and optimal fuel is complex carbohydrates. If you don't give a sports car optimal fuel, it can't run. And it's the same thing with the food. You have to have right amounts, certain timing, and you can't avoid something because it will catch up to you eventually. The body will say, I can't do this anymore.
Okay. Now, I guess a little bit taking it from here, the case of keto adaptation. A lot of people that I see, they love following like a keto diet or also doing fasting, right? Because and by logic, right? Like fat cells and fats can provide like more energy than actually can a carb do, right? But we know it's not like a preferred source of energy for our muscle cells. Now, I understand that if performance is not like your I guess your primary key target, uh, following like a keto diet, it's okay. That's what I was reading on the it was on the guidance, on the nutrition guidance for marathon training, I guess for
Hmm.
the American College of Sports Nutrition, something like that. I'm sorry if I don't have the name right. But if performance is not really what you're trying to target, then a keto, like using fats for as a form of fuel, it's okay.
Sure.
Can you provide more information of using following a keto diet in case of endurance training?
Sure. So I have to say, my biggest approach to diet types is sustainability. So I will work with a client and pretty much help them accommodate to whatever type of diet that they're interested in trying that's going to work for them, whether it's ketogenic diets or intermittent fasting. If they feel that this is making them feel good, their progress is great, and it might not just be for physical activity performance, but just general health, there's a way to do it in a healthy way with lean proteins, again, omega-3 containing fats, and life is great. Unfortunately, what tends to happen with these diets is sustainability does become an issue. So if we're cycling through them, where we're going through periods of, I just can't do this, especially with holiday months. And sometimes it's not just an issue of self restraint, there's cultural components, there's societal components, there's cost components, then this might not be the diet for us. So it might be working for a friend, a colleague, but it might not be the approach you want to take because we could do more damage to our metabolism and our body than good by cycling through them. So always think through if you're going to try it, if you're going to do it, look at your labs, work with somebody like a registered dietitian to make sure we're doing it the proper way. And then ask yourself, can I do this day after day, long term? Can this be my lifestyle? Or is this something that's just a temporary 2 week trial that could actually damage my body instead of help me?
And I think you're bringing like an important point because I think like for example, in diets, like vegetarian diets, or like now we're more trending with vegan and plant-based diet, right? I feel like um, we try to follow them or use them, and you feel great. You're like in the first 2 weeks, 1 month, maybe a couple of months, you're like, you know what, I'm following like a plant-based diet, like vegetarian, and I feel amazing. It even helped me. But suddenly, like I think with time, you start noticing some deficiencies or some like things that are not there. Are we missing important micronutrients like in this type of diets with the, I guess, at the short term or long term effect?
That's a great question. And when done properly, plant-based diets can be a great source of nutrition. They can still be done even if you are a marathon runner or any type of
Mhm.
athlete, and you don't have to deal with deficiencies. But you do need to know how to do them properly. So making sure that we're getting complete proteins with our plant-based choices, that we're not relying too heavily on processed plant-based foods that contain a lot of different ingredients, preservatives, sodium, and also making sure that we are getting our vegetables. If you kind of think of vegetarian, it has vegetable almost in the title, so does vegan, but sometimes we can stray away from getting those key essential vitamins and minerals that they provide because we're focusing a lot on just the carbohydrates, but none of the veggies that also give the complex part. And so that's where I see big deficiencies, is that we start this diet as a trend or to hope to maybe lose some weight or just feel different. Or we try it with juicing, but then we find that we don't like juice after a couple of weeks. So sustainability becomes key. How can you do this or make it a part of your lifestyle? If somebody's interested in doing one of these approaches, even if it is ketogenic or vegetarian, another way could be switching a few meals per week. Maybe you don't go fully into an approach, but to make it more sustainable, you try 1 to 2 days of these types of meals and see if this is something you can keep doing.
I like, and I'm gonna be honest, I try to follow like mostly like vegetarian, but like here and there, I feel like I'm missing. I think it's very hard to have like the proper intake of like the protein. It's like such a challenge and have like this amount of variety of diversity like in the diet. It like so difficult that here and there I feel like I need to cheat to really like meet the demand of that the body needs, right? Because it's hard like
Mhm.
following like all of these different types of diets, right? And that you see. All right. Okay. So carb loading. Sarah, when is it recommended to do carb loading?
I like this question. I
Okay.
think that this one is a tough one, right? Because we hear about it, we learn about it, and it kind of reminds me when I was a child, I used to run track, and my grandma, she would feed me a ton of pasta the night before I had a meet. And I guess grandma had some points into what she was doing, right? She knew a little bit about nutrition, but we didn't call it carb loading back then. And so I know that this gets asked a lot. Should I do it? When should I do it? How do I do it? So I want you to really think about how you train again for your marathons. Think about how you train for your events. And most of the time, we don't just train the week before or 2 weeks before or days before. So with carb loading, it's very similar. If this is something you want to attempt and it can be beneficial in some cases, then you have to be training your body weeks before to get accustomed to being able to utilize those carbohydrates in the time when you're going to need them. So if race week is the only time that you're incorporating these variety of complex carbohydrates in certain amounts to really build up that glycogen storage, I guarantee you your body's not going to be used to it. So it's not really going to know what to do with it the day of your race, which is why we might feel heavy or we
Okay.
might feel as though we're bloated. And that's because we didn't train for that. So it's
Okay.
very similar. So I would even recommend having some mock race day events where you can practice building up your body's tolerance to these carbohydrates to see how you feel. And it's very varied. So if you hear a certain amount of carbs work for somebody, maybe you hear a recommendation like 8 to 12 grams per kilogram of body weight and then start to taper, you might have a different number. So some food journaling can be really helpful for you as an athlete to see, where do I feel great? Maybe it's with a certain portion, and that's going to be what helps you the day of your race, because it is very varied. There's not a specific number that's a cookie cutter method that's going to work for every single athlete.
I think well, for me what it works is every time that I have like my long run, what day before I try to have like the rice cooker and just have like like simple bowls of rice and just put something on top of it and just have like a couple of bowls like during the day. But like you're saying, we have to even practice the types of food because some foods can produce like a lot of GI issues, right? And we want to
Mm-hmm.
stay away from that. So I don't know, you become like so picky of what you can eat and what you cannot eat, right? Because you already know like something might be very GI sensitive. Uh, what are some tips that we can do like as part of that carb loading? Do we focus just on complex carbs? Can we like what it matters is just a caloric intake, even in Gatorades or sport drinks, whatever, or should we focus more on the quality on of the food? Does it matter the amount or more like the quality? Yeah, probably both, right? But
Mm-hmm.
let's
That's
see
a
what you
great
say.
that's a great question. I think it depends, right? I wish I had this perfect answer for you. The point is to get them, because that's probably going to make the biggest difference, is going to be whether you get them or not. Because you can imagine, even if you focus on quality carbs, but you're not getting enough, it might not give you the results that you're looking for. On the opposite end, if we don't think about quality at least a little bit, what could happen is come race day, we might not feel the best. We might feel the bloat. We might feel distended. We might not have the energy that we would like to have that's sustained, that comes from foods that have fiber. And
Okay.
if we're not used to fiber, fiber is our enemy because we didn't train the body to get used to it. We talk a lot about the benefits in health, but if we didn't train to really get used to complex carbs with tons of fiber, we're not going to feel very good. We might not even be able to go to the restroom the day of the race. And then again, it makes us want to start to avoid those foods when if we had just prepared the body gradually, come race day, we feel great. We can go the longer mile. We don't feel any GI discomfort. So I think it's a little bit of both. Can you get away with not focusing on one or the other? If I had to say which direction, you probably could get away more with focusing on not such high quality because you're getting enough of the carbs versus quantity is probably going to get you. If you're not getting enough calories, if you're not getting enough protein, if you're not getting enough of everything, that's probably where you're going to start to see injuries become more present and other types of issues.
And now talking about simple sugars, I know like a lot of these gouts and gels, they're like mostly simple sugars, right? They have fructose, sucrose, and all of these sucroses. But is there particularly one that is better on top of the other one when it comes like with these simple sugars, like to get that like fast energy? Because I know some of them can be a little bit GI sensitive, and of course, like again, you have to practice with them. But is there like ones that are like better than the other ones? And talking about these gouts too, there are like ones that are like mostly simple sugars, and the other ones that are mostly like starch based. Um, is what's the difference between I guess the starch based ones versus the simple sugar ones when it comes to working in our bodies?
Sure. So one of the unfortunate things about supplements is they have kind of benefits and cons to them. They're not regulated by anybody. And because of this, they can really state to claim this is going to help with X, Y, and Z, but not necessarily do so. And that all becomes very legal. So that's one of the unfortunate things is we don't really know, are these ingredients verifiable? They for sure have them. There's things as an athlete that you can do to verify that this is something that will benefit you. There's organizations such as the Sports Authority that do second and third party testing of supplements, and you can look for a brand that you might be interested in and compare it to see if it's being tested by somebody outside of the organization. So that's one way. And then as you're starting to pick and choose, the starch base might have other ingredients such as fibers that are going to take a little bit longer or sit in the GI tract a little bit longer to be digested. In comparison to something like a simple carbohydrate, it's going to give you that quick boost that you might need to kind of finish out a race or to get through a difficult part of a race. And these can still be beneficial. One of the reasons is the access, right? Of course, we would prefer that we could get fruit and had the time to dry out some fruit, prepare our pack, carry it somewhere, have one of our family members be there at the right time. But that's not always ideal. And so these non-perishable items can be very convenient to allow us to get that extra boost of energy that we need at certain points in the race. What's important, and one of the things I do see as a negative part to things like gels, is that athletes sometimes will use them but forget to hydrate because we're so used to just using the gel and we don't do what I would consider like a flush with this, and we just do the gel and then we start to feel kind of funny, and it's because yes, we got the carbohydrate component but we didn't get the fluid. So always make sure that you are considering your hydration status as well, because we can get really confused with I'm getting a deficiency because I'm not getting enough carb, and it actually might be that you're dehydrated. It might have nothing to do with that carbohydrate based product.
Okay, I see. Yeah, and that, yeah, that's completely true. There's like a lot of these products that yeah, they're based on a lot of sugars, like the Martin ones, right?
Mm-hmm.
You put in water, but yeah, maybe we're not taking so much that input on just like the hydration status, I guess. I guess talking about that hydration, now that we're getting there, um, what would be like the recommended intake of water? I see a lot of runners out there. I never see them carry like a water bottle. I don't know why. It looks like it's like I don't know, like they feel proud of just not eating, like getting enough water. But I see them and I'm like, they're like not taking water. So is this could this have like an impact in our bodies, not having that appropriate hydration during our long runs, especially?
Mm-hmm. If you're not optimizing your water, you're really not doing the best for your race. I think if you really had to focus on one thing nutrition wise that was really going to be a game changer, your hydration status is going to be it. If we're waiting, which oftentimes people use thirst, as their cue. That's my sign for me to go get my water. You waited too long. Thirst is the body's last resort to say, please save me. I'm about to pass
Okay.
out, do something. And this is just, even on a day to day, we shouldn't wait until we're thirsty. So it's important that we get ourselves on a schedule. If you're not used to it, just like anything else, it takes practice. You have to come up with a good schedule. That way you can plan to hydrate appropriately. When I work with athletes, I like to see them with their water. That becomes part of my recommendation. If you come to see me, if I see you, if you're my student, I'll ask you, where's that water? Because it's important that we're hydrating even when we're not training. Hydration should be on our mind. In terms of how much, that's going to vary. So one way to know how much are we actually losing, you can always do a pre-run weight
Mhm.
and a post-run weight and really compare how much am I losing when I do an event versus when I do a practice run versus when I do my long run. And we might find that our hydration needs change based on those differences in events. And then the other part to that is if we go for a simple run, we might not need a water with electrolytes. We might not need something like a Powerade or a Gatorade or a sports drink. But if we're starting to do exercise longer than an hour, 2 hours, 3 hours, which with some of your long runs, that is the case, we do need to start considering those electrolytes. We do need to replenish them. Water alone might not be enough to get us through.
Okay, so you bring like an important point because we have our gels, right? And I know the recommendation is about 60 grams per carbs per hour. If it's less than an hour, and I believe it's more than that, 2 hours, 60, 90 grams per hour. That's about the
Mhm.
recommendation, right? Now, plus our hydration, right? That's like separate. Now, like I guess in this case, should we always carry water simple, or like you're saying, water with electrolytes? Because we also have our gels. So should we go for simple water instead, or is it better to go with the water and the electrolytes?
I would say prepare for your race. So think about it like you guys do for shoes. I've seen you, Dr. Maria. You have some real nice shoes. And so prepare for your race with nutrition like you do with your shoes. You have different shoes for different events. And so there's going to be different hydration needs for different races or different days. And so there could be days where, again, if you know you're going to be out there and the time of the day is going to matter, the weather in El Paso is going to make a difference, you might need to make sure that the beverage has electrolytes automatically every single time. Versus if you're doing a very short run, or interval training and it's going to be less than an hour, maybe pure water is going to be just enough and you don't need to add anything to it.
Okay, that's those. I think those are like important key points to know. But whatever, with or without, please carry your water. At least we're gonna
Yes,
agree on
please
that,
do.
right?
Please do.
Please, please do. Okay, so I guess another question will be like, what will be like some common, I guess, sign? We have like a couple of 5 minutes left. Some common, I guess, signs and symptoms that we should start paying attention. That hey, this is a sign for you to go to the doctor or go to the dietitian. Like you're missing out, and I don't know, something's happening, and you should go ahead and get a checkup. Are there any general signs and symptoms that we should have like a red flag and pay attention to them?
Sure. I think a big one that's a hard one to really distinguish, and this has a lot to do with our El Paso pride and culture, is fatigue. We might feel tired and we're just not overcoming this fatigue. This is a fatigue that isn't just from having kiddos or a busy day at work. This is something where we start to not have that joy of running anymore. I would say go and get double checked, meet with the dietitian to see what else might be going on. That would be a big sign. I think some of the other ones are going to be especially related to things like hydration. Are we feeling kind of dizzy? And we shouldn't be feeling this vertigo that's just not going away, and we're starting to feel extremely dizzy, or we're starting to feel that we're getting headaches on a very frequent basis, or we're starting to get cramping, Charlie horses, calambres, and these are starting to come more and more frequent than
More
usual.
frequent.
This isn't a one-time event. I would say at any point, if you feel like, hey, I could benefit from some additional input, it doesn't hurt. Maybe even before you start to feel symptoms, you go and you meet with a medical provider to ask important questions, not to get clearance, but to get guidance so that when things do come up, you already had what we would consider a backup plan, and we're not waiting to be passed out on the sideline, not able to complete our race.
Okay, awesome. All right, Sarah. Well, thank you so much for all this wonderful information. I think we can keep going with like so many information that like it will be like important, especially for runners to understand. To learn about and understand. I really think that nutrition is like such a big challenge. The key point, like you never know what like you're missing. You're trying to find like those important elements to make sure you're able to and like have that proper endurance, not only like on a daily basis, but also like for races, not right, and not hit the wall, have like a good performance, feeling strong. Like for me, I think that if I don't PR, that's okay. But if I finish a race feeling strong and healthy, that for me, like honestly, that's a win-win. Like I'm so
Mm-hmm.
happy about it that I didn't die of it, I didn't get cramps, I didn't hit the wall or nothing. That for
Mm-hmm.
me is like a big win. And I think we should start paying attention to different ways to show how we're improving and learning as well as part of this long distance sport. Is there a way like that we can reach out to you, talk to you, get guidance, know more about you? If you want to share that information with us.
Sure. So currently, I am helping create future registered dietitians. And so I'm not necessarily practicing on the one on one at the moment, but I have a wonderful team of registered dietitians, and we're at Sun City Dietitians. We're located in Central Paso. We work with a lot of the marathon runners, especially for the half marathon and the full marathon that happens in February. We have a body composition device if you need us, and we also offer virtual appointments. So you can always find us over on Yandell and again, Sun City Dietitians. And I'm really happy to be here with you.
And if we want to go and get like a checkup for this body composition,
Sure.
do we mention we're training for a marathon? I would like to get, I don't know, the marathon
Yes.
packet with Sarah or something like that. Can we do that?
Yes. Yeah, so what ends up happening, we don't have appointments for the body composition, but we ask that you call ahead so that if there's a protocol that we want you to follow, you can do so. And then one of our providers meets with you one-on-one to just let you know where you stand. And I've noticed as the marathon comes closer and closer, athletes start coming more and more to get their pre and post measurements done. And then we give you your results. And there's a very small fee for the body composition. Unless you're our client, if you see us for nutrition therapy, then it's free. It just comes with our services. And so you can just call and say that that's what you're interested in, or if it's sports nutrition specific, my team can tell you more about what they would need for you to come in and make an appointment.
Do we require a reference or just call
Great
and
question. So we do require referral, and that's just so we can request all of those great things we talked about today. So if we want to look at vitamins, minerals, it's a lot easier for us with the referral to then request it. So even if you have a PPO that doesn't require that referral, that's just our protocol so that we can communicate with your providers a lot easier.
all right, well, there you go. And I'm going to make sure to put like all the links to your website and information right there on social media. And also, everyone, guys, don't forget talking about the marathon. Of course, I'm a proud ambassador. Make sure to register for the marathon, half marathon on Sunday, February 23, 2025. You make sure to use the code MAFREF for an extra $10 discount for that part of that registration process. All right. Well, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed the show. And if you have any other specific questions that you would like to know, please let me know so I can make sure that we get the right person just for you. All right. Thank you, guys.